said previously, there are many cultural groups in every society today. And in all of Europe, 5 of 360 cultural groups form the majority. If a cultural identity is based on race, for example, Black culture, it is usually related to a physical marker. If we are talking about ethnic cultures, we are talking about ancestry and language, as well as cultural difference. These can be due to processes of migration, transnationalism, or globalization. Forming minorities or diasporas, these processes influence cultures. Occasionally, scholars refer to cultural groups that do not form the majority of a society and have a tendency to stand out as different. These are called subcultures. In its first meaning, suggested by Chicago School, subcultures refer to deviant groups from the majority culture. The Birmingham School, on the other hand, focused on youth subcultures in the 1960s from a class perspective. An example of a subculture from the 60s are hippies. Hippie subculture had its roots in 19th century transcendentalism and the music style of 50s and 60s. Their key standpoint was their resistance to Vietnam War, but some also had common arguments about sexual freedom and drug taking, which all made them non-conforming deviants from the majority view. They dressed colorfully, acted differently. Some other groups can be named as hip-hop fans, who sounded their marginalized voices with graffiti, or bikers, who were mostly outlaws going around in their black clothing and big bikes. And maybe a more recent example would be rooftoppers, those photographers who illegally enter high buildings and high places to take extreme photos, risking their lives. Today, what we understand from subcultures has moved from the understanding of deviant culture suggested by Chicago School and young, lower middle class white male culture suggested by Birmingham School. Subcultures are more generally defined as groups that operate by a distinctive set of standards and behavior patterns within a larger society. They don't have to be deviant, but they will still be treated as the other due to having less in numbers, not necessarily having lesser status. There is no definitive checklist for what constitutes a subculture, but general characteristics can be listed as follows. In terms of participation, subcultures do not have formal leaders. Participation is informal, and a person can be part of different subcultures or can be part of a subculture and the majority culture. So it is not necessarily exclusive. They share distinct meanings in cultural objects, values, and practices. They have similar values that shape how they live their everyday lives. They are unified around a collective and shared identity. They usually resist to some sort of an issue they see in the society and become marginalized, usually becoming outliers to the mainstream society because of their marginal views and actions. And they have a tendency to have a specialized vocabulary. So they have their own language. Some of these can also be discussed to be subcultures in looking at these characteristics and definitions. Harry Potter fans, fashion subcultures, for example, gothic lolitas, gender subcultures, queer, transgender, LGBTI+ subcultures, rockers, geeks, computer gamers, emos, hipsters, and others. In the next video, you will hear a queer vegan activist from Turkey talk about their views and definition of what it means to be a queer vegan in Turkey. But before that, just a reminder of how place and time influences cultures. In a predominantly Buddhist society, or in a country like India, where Buddhism and Hinduism coexist with other religions, being vegan will not constitute a marginalized subculture. However, in Turkey, where veganism is a right-based movement, where it is seen as a distinct lifestyle choice, as standing out from the society, it can be argued to be a subculture. But let's see what an activist thinks about it.